I am the architect. I created the Matrix.
Shall we play a game?
I honestly think you ought to sit down calmly, take a stress pill, and think things over.
Welcome to Web Talk with Bob. Here we are again for my daily broadcast. Let me ask you a question. Which would you rather sell, apples or oranges? Let me tell you a story, and then I'll illustrate my point. I was in Switzerland several years ago, traveling with a Swiss executive. He said, "Bob, you're a smart person. You've been in business a long time. Let me describe a situation to you, and you tell me which you would do." I said, "Okay." He described the following situation. You are considering opening a store on a main street in town. You go to this street and find out that every store on this street sells apples. None of these stores sell oranges. They all sell apples. Now, what I ask you this, Bob, very simply, based on this type of analysis, which would you rather sell, apples or oranges? And I replied, well, I'd rather sell oranges because everybody else is selling apples. And if I sell oranges, I could be the only one on the street selling oranges. He said, well, it's certainly a reasonable answer, but not very analytical. Let me explain the problem in a little more detail. If you elect to sell apples, then you know that there is a current market for apples because, after all, these stores have been in business for a while and they're all selling apples. So if you elect to sell apples, you know who your competition is. It's these stores on the street. You know what their prices are. By carefully analyzing how much they sell and watching their customers, you can determine what the total market for apples is. And you then can make a pretty good analysis and plan for going about getting yourself a reasonable slice of the apple market. But now let's look at the oranges. If you sell oranges, you might be the only one, but what are you assuming? First, you're assuming that there's an orange market. Now, direct observation tells you, unless you believe that all these stores are absolutely dumb, direct observation tells you there is not a current market for oranges, or these stores would be selling oranges in addition to apples, but they're not selling oranges. So unless you're going to call each of these managers stupid, then you should prefer to sell apples into a known market rather than sell oranges into a market that may not exist. It's a very interesting thought process. Many people, when coming up with a new idea, say, oh gee, everybody else has that idea, therefore I'm not going to do it. It's like selling shoes. Everybody sells shoes, so I'm not going to sell shoes. But guess what? A small company in Thailand decided that shoes was going to be a nice thing to sell, even though everybody sold them. And bingo, in 3 years, they're selling online $400 million of shoes a year. Because most people will tell you it's much easier to carve off a slice of a current market than create a whole market. And oh, by the way, if you create a whole market for oranges, as we were discussing earlier, guess what the other stores will do? They'll come in now and sell oranges after you created the market. You see, there may not be such a big benefit as many people would tell you to be a first mover, to be the first in. Sometimes to be second is good, because a second or third person in has an advantage in that they have the history of observing the success of other companies before them. Lots of examples of this. IBM was not the first to enter the personal computer business. Google was not the first company to enter the pay-per-click business. They were about the fourth company. They just did a better job. So when you get the question, would you rather sell apples or oranges, before you provide an answer, think about it. Would you rather go after a slice of an identified market that you know exists, or would you rather take the risk of creating a market from scratch? And that's all for today. That's Bob Sherwood's Web Talk with Bob podcast. Listen up, tune in, Tune on. Let me make you web ready.
I am the architect.